Romain, a junkie, was cruising in his sports car, heading to a party. On the way, he encountered a strange woman who suddenly crashed into his car. As he was about to get out and check the damage, the woman, without saying a word, jumped into the passenger seat and started fiddling with the car keys, urging Romain to drive. She had a bandage on her head, suggesting she had been injured. Romain, seeing this, was about to call the police, but then hesitated. He had just used some cocaine, and he knew that the cops might arrest him instead. So, he hung up. The woman began crying, making Romain feel even more unsure of what to do. He decided to drive her to the nearest hospital. As they were driving, the woman grew increasingly agitated, especially when the high beams of a car behind them flashed in her direction. She started to panic, even trying to jump out of the car to escape. Thankfully, Romain managed to calm her down, and she finally settled back into the passenger seat. At this point, the woman suddenly pulled out a satellite phone, and a man's voice came through. The man said, "An infected test subject has escaped. For safety, her tongue, teeth, and salivary glands have all been removed." The woman couldn't speak, and Romain didn't quite understand what was going on. It only made her more agitated. She began banging her head against the car, then rummaged through the glove compartment and pulled out a knife, plunging it toward her neck. Romain froze in shock at the sight. While his brain was still trying to process what was happening, the woman suddenly lunged at him, attempting to bite his neck. But before she could, she quickly lost consciousness and collapsed. Romain, now in a complete daze, didn't go to the hospital as he originally planned. Instead, he sped straight back home, staring at himself in the mirror, covered in blood. He immediately stripped off his clothes and rushed to the bathroom to take a shower. When he returned to the garage, he discovered that the woman was gone. As Romain searched around the house, the doorbell suddenly rang. It was his girlfriend, Anais, coming to find him. Romain barely paid attention to Anais and quickly directed her to the living room before continuing his search for the woman. But after a thorough look around the house, he still couldn't find any trace of her. Just as he was about to send Anais away, two of his party-going friends showed up. They were there to pick him up for the party. Romain obviously had no interest in going to a party right now, but his friends wouldn't stop honking at the door, even getting into a near altercation with the neighbors. With no other choice, Romain activated his home security system and reluctantly got into his friend's car to head to the party. Throughout the ride, he was distracted, his mind entirely preoccupied with the woman. He began hearing strange sounds, and his neck uncontrollably twisted from side to side. It was clear that Romain had been infected by the virus the woman carried. When they arrived at the party, the bright lights above made Romain feel extremely uncomfortable. He quickly found a hood and put it on to block out the intense light. He went into the bathroom, staring at his reflection, only to suddenly notice his body beginning to twitch uncontrollably. Meanwhile, Anais and her friend Julia were chatting next door. Under the influence of the medication, Julia casually mentioned that she and Romain had a fling, and that she might even be pregnant now. Anais thought Julia was just joking and didn't pay much attention, leaving the bathroom. But as soon as she stepped out, Romain walked in from the side, and the two of them immediately started kissing. Julia was taken aback when she noticed that Romain's eyes were glowing with an eerie light. He quickly rushed to the mirror to check, but didn't see anything unusual. Just as he was trying to make sense of it, the phone suddenly rang. It was Romain's father on the other end, informing him that the house's security system had triggered an alarm and asking him to hurry home and shut it off. Romain, feeling uneasy, reluctantly made his way down the stairs. But as he reached the first floor, blood began to flow from his nostrils. The harsh lighting made him feel increasingly disoriented. One of his friends tried to talk to him, but before he could get a word out, Romain suddenly threw him to the ground and started brutally beating him. Julia rushed over to intervene, but Romain shoved her away without a second thought. The noise was overwhelming, and Romain felt like his head was about to explode. In a panic, he jumped on a nearby electric scooter and rushed home. After disabling the alarm, he was shocked to find his house in disarray. On the floor, he noticed the woman's satellite phone. He followed the sounds to the bathroom, where he saw the woman sitting in the bathtub, using some kind of tool to dig into her neck. Moments later, a red-lighted device was removed from her neck. The woman, holding the device, seemed to want to say something to Romain, but he was too stunned to react. As soon as he left the bathroom, he saw a group of masked, black-clad men outside. To his horror, he also noticed black-clad figures at his neighbor's house, one of them carrying a body. The woman inside his house then began to mutate, her body contorting as she started to crawl in a disturbingly unnatural way. Seeing all this, Romain was terrified. He realized that he had been targeted. In a panic, he rushed out of the house and sprinted toward the cornfields. As he ran, he couldn't stop himself from laughing uncontrollably, and soon, he began to gnaw at his own arm. Just then, a car screeched to a halt in front of him. The speeding car almost collided with Anais, who was still calling Romain's phone, trying to understand why he had betrayed her. She got into a taxi, but soon her nose began to bleed, and her body started to feel cold. It was clear that Anais had also been infected. Julia called to tell her that something went horribly wrong at the party, and now everyone was acting terrifying. As they drove, the taxi driver noticed someone following their car and pulled over to confront them. Without warning, the follower pulled out a gun and shot him down. Panicked, Anais jumped into the driver's seat, slammed the gas pedal, and sped away from the scene. As she drove, she started feeling very unwell. She stopped the car and stumbled out, only to be seized by violent convulsions. With the black-clad figures closing in behind her, Anais had no choice but to push through the pain and keep running. She barely made it out of the train tracks just as a train passed by, giving her a brief moment of relief and distancing her from the pursuers. Desperate, she tried calling the police, but strangely, no one answered the phone. Anais was left with no choice but to duck into a nearby bar. In the bathroom, she stared at her reflection in the mirror, horrified to see her body covered in blood. It turned out that she had been shot through her body by bullets, but strangely, she felt no pain at all. Suddenly, gunshots rang out from outside the bathroom. Anais peeked through the crack in the door and saw that the black-clad figures had caught up and were beginning to massacre everyone inside the bar. Panicking, she quickly jumped out of the bathroom window, but her body once again started to convulse uncontrollably. After a few moments, Anais regained control of herself and immediately called her best friend, Julia. The two arranged to meet at a large bridge. As Anais made her way there, her behavior became increasingly erratic. Passing through an underground tunnel, she suddenly attacked a woman. In the midst of it all, Anais seemed almost delirious with excitement, humming to herself, bouncing around as if in a trance. She then approached a man and, without any warning, tried to ride off on his bicycle. The man tried to stop her, but Anais sprayed him with a face full of blood and then threw him into the river. Alarms blared all around the city, and helicopters patrolled the skies, signaling that the entire city had descended into chaos. Soon, Julia met up with Anais. Seeing her covered in blood, Julia wanted to take her to the hospital, but completely overlooked Anais's strange behavior. At this point, Anais had completely lost her sanity and was relentlessly pulling at Julia's hair. Julia thought Anais was just feeling insecure and didn't think much of it, continuing to reassure her. But things escalated quickly. Anais grabbed Julia by the neck and then sank her teeth into Julia's shoulder. Julia could no longer tolerate it and forcefully shoved Anais out of the scooter. It was then that Julia realized just how abnormal Anais was, and she quickly started the scooter, trying to escape. Not far down the road, Julia received a call from her mother. Her mother told her that the town was now dangerous, and as she was in a wheelchair, she couldn't evacuate and needed Julia's help to get home. But just as Julia hung up, Anais's voice came from behind, muttering that she was going to eat Julia's face. Terrified, Julia couldn't afford to stop and hurried away. Once she finally got on the elevator in her apartment building, she breathed a sigh of relief. Just as the elevator doors were about to close, Anais suddenly rushed toward it. Thankfully, the doors shut just in time. But of course, that's when the elevator malfunctioned. Julia tried to get help from the building's security, but there was no response, because the guard had already been attacked by Anais. Julia was on the brink of a breakdown. Her sister upstairs heard Julia's cries for help and was about to offer assistance when suddenly, a gunshot rang out and everything went eerily quiet. Julia realized her sister was likely in danger as well. Just then, the elevator seemed to start working again. Julia rushed to her home, but on the way, she passed numerous bodies, disfigured by bites, and her worry for her family deepened. When she finally reached her house, she was horrified to find Anais frantically gnawing on their mother's body. Terrified, Julia immediately turned and fled, but Anais wasn't planning on letting her go. She chased right after her. On her way, Julia encountered a woman in black. Noticing that Julia hadn't been infected, she ordered her to stay still and not move. The woman then began to search the area, but she couldn't find Anais. Unbeknownst to her, Anais had silently crept up behind her and bitten into her leg. Realizing she had been infected, the woman removed her mask and told Julia about their mission. She believed Julia was still unaffected, so she handed her the gun and asked her to turn around. Without warning, the woman used the pistol to end her own life. Julia, in tears, suddenly began to laugh hysterically. It seemed the virus inside her had started to take control as well. Meanwhile, the city behind her had fallen into chaos. The government, now desperate, had decided to deploy nuclear weapons to turn everything to ash.